Remember, do not underestimate the power of PlayStation.
Chairman Alonzo Drek thanks you for your sacrifice.
Captain, did you know Drek's secret project was a Blargian snagglebeast?
It is. I wonder why it wasn't in any of my intel. I was expecting something much less lethal. Don't worry. Just relax and remember what I taught you.
What did you teach me? Captain? Oh boy.
On April 12th here in the States, Insomniac Games released the new Ratchet & Clank onto the PlayStation 4, marking a reboot, remake, reimagining, whatever else you'd like to call it for the series that ties into a movie coming out later this month. If you're new to this video series, I started playing through the Ratchet games for the first time back in January, so if you'd like to know my history with this series, I have videos similar to this one for you to watch. So let's call a spade and get the obvious out of the way here quickly. The game is gorgeous to look at. I'm going to try and render this video well enough to give you a good idea, but I'm sure that no matter how good I get this video to look, it will be doing a disservice to the game's visuals. Now, I've not played every current gen game, but I think there's little doubt that this is one of the most eye-catching games ever. Lighting, textures, effects, character models, nearly everything is a joy to look at. Not one world in this game sticks out as looking subpar. And really, there's only a couple small aspects of the game that I feel equipped to criticize, and they are incredibly minor. For one, the game incorporates scenes from the film adaptation at points. Now, I think from a visual standpoint, these actually mostly stand in line with the game's visuals and don't look too out of place. Unfortunately, the way the game transitions from these scenes to game cutscenes and sometimes back to gameplay are usually somewhat jarring. I don't want to say the implementation feels rushed, but they don't feel as elegant as they could or even perhaps should. And another aspect are some in-game scenes that feature really stiff animation. Most scenes in the game look great, Insomniac has fantastic animators, but every now and then you get an exchange like this one between our main characters and Skid and his agent, and it just looks kinda lifeless. Moments like these are rare, though, and don't detract from the game overall. Like Into the Nexus, the game also runs at 30 frames per second, but unlike Into the Nexus, it is much more steady, leading to a much less jarring experience. 60 is still ideal in my opinion, but it's nice enough to have a largely smooth 30. The music is newly written, and it is a nice blend of the more techno tones from the PS2 titles and the live scores of the future titles. It fits the vision Insomniac has had for the series recently, while harkening back to its origin some, which is pretty fitting. The game, if you weren't aware, is a reimagining of the original Ratchet & Clank game on PS4, as Insomniac are calling it. Really, I can't put my finger on it. You can call it a reboot, but it's kinda not. You can call it a remake, but it's kinda new, and you can call it a reimagining, but it's apparently also not. It's really confusing. Most of the worlds return from the first game with slight twists, with a couple new worlds thrown in for good measure. The gameplay, however, is a refined version of what the Future series featured, with a few weapons and gadgets brought back from the first game to get to play in the new stylings. Weapons like the Pyrocitor and gadgets like the Hydro Displacer are welcomed back and feel natural along advances like the Pixelizer and the always fantastic Mr. Zircon. Even the Trespasser returns with its unique brand of door puzzle, which can be automatically skipped if you're not good at them. Though there's a trophy for not skipping them, so maybe you shouldn't do that. I was kind of wondering how all of the original devices would fit in, games later from their inception, but none feel out of place, and they're all still a joy to use. I actually really hope the Pixelizer becomes a series mainstay. It has a nice shotgun blast feel, and the sound design is so addictive. Ratchet himself feels as good as ever to play, possibly the best he's ever felt in my opinion. Jumps, swing shots, and combat all feel fantastic. Pretty much what you would expect from a refined leap to more powerful hardware. I was kind of worried I would be burnt out on the gameplay coming hot off the heels of all the other games, but unleashing a flurry of destruction in this game was surprisingly rejuvenating. Leveling and upgrading weapons got me addicted all over again, and I was always looking forward to seeing what I could unlock next. And a nice new twist in everything is that, in addition to returning collectible gold bolts, of which there are fewer this time, there's also a card collecting system in place. Now, these display portraits and facts about characters, weapons, and locations from this game and ones from throughout the series. These can either be found in packs throughout worlds, or they can be dropped from enemies like regular bolts. Completing 3 card sets can net you extra perks like a higher drop rate for cards, bolts, and the raritanium used for weapons upgrades. Every few battles you'll get another card or two, and everything just keeps feeding back into the main gameplay loop, and it's so addictive. Now, most worlds in this game actually follow the original game's layouts to a T. As the game is technically a remake, you might have expected that, but for those hoping for a more Sonic Generations styled approach to the game, you might be a tad disappointed. But from the sewers of Rilgar to Pokotaru's Oceanic Resort to Gadgetron's testbed headquarters, if you play the first game and like those worlds, you'll feel right at home. More notable changes happen to planets like Veldin, Kirwan, Gaspar, and Kortu, which all feel fun to explore and layout-wise fit in well with the rest of the game. Overall, I think this stands to show that these levels can still hold up to a modern scrutiny 14 years later, and that Insomniac did pretty damn well out of the gate. So Ratchet plays as you would expect, but interestingly with Clank, they returned him more to his roots. There are no netherverses to navigate or time-based puzzles to figure out. You're back with Gadgetbots that can turn into bridges, be used as springs, or power specific devices. If you didn't like these sections before, you're not going to be crazy about them here either. But they do their job at breaking up the pace nicely enough as expected. I'll note that while the puzzles are newly designed, it's pretty much just the same bag of tricks in a new environment. Now, there are also some Naughty Dog-esque sections where Clank runs away from new villain Victor Von Ion as you dodge his attacks. These are probably the weakest parts of the game overall, and let me assure you, they do not hold up well on repeat playthroughs. If you can move left or right and hold down on the analog stick for a few minutes at a time and react to very manageable attacks, you are set, as that is all you do in these sections. Now, this is kind of a spoiler, so if you haven't played the game yet, here's your sign. But ultimately, you don't even fight Victor, so all of this build-up throughout the game kind of results in an anticlimactic finish. In my Into the Nexus review, I stated that it was nice to have a planet to use the hover pack on, but wished I had more than a couple places to use it. And those sections return primarily on Gaspar, but find their way into a few other planets like Kortu. Gaspar is a notably fun part of the game. It still has a couple of its original paths to explore in the traditional way, but the future series' knack for giving you giant monsters to hunt returns, and in a much longer game like this, having an area to go blow off steam and hunt creatures with a hover pack is still very much appreciated. Speaking of kind of side objectives, this is a good time to note that there are no arenas in this game, which might disappoint those who enjoy having those extra objectives. That said, hoverboard races make a return, and all the old tricks work in these tracks. Except the bolt glitch, but you don't need that anymore thanks to a better economy balance and New Game Plus. Like most of the planets, these races feature pretty much the exact same layouts as before, and have bronze, silver, and gold competitions to clear. These are honestly still just as fun as ever, but if you're going for better times and PlayStation trophies, get ready to hear the announcers say the same things over and over. Now, there are also a couple flying sections in your ship that aren't quite anything to write home about. They're both rather unexpected, but being one-off sections, they're rather simplistic to get through and can't be revisited without starting a new game, so they're just kinda there? So despite a few gripes, as you have likely inferred, the gameplay of Ratchet & Clank on PS4 is largely top-notch as you should expect. I know I've spent most of this review complaining, but after reviewing like 8 or 9 Ratchet & Clank games, it gets hard to say in new ways that the gameplay is just great. You know, Ratchet is the bulk of the game, so the bulk of the game is top-notch. Now, fans of the future series will definitely note some shortcomings in comparison to those titles. There's no arena, the planet navigation is simplified, and frankly the Clank sections are less interesting to play, but overall, I think there's more than enough here to delight any fan of the series, or even someone who hasn't touched a Ratchet game. And for now, I'd like to touch on the story in this title to close out this review, and I will completely talk about anything in the game, so if you don't want any spoilers, just know that I highly recommend this game. Come back once you've sated yourself with the plot. Until then, thank you for watching. So what we have here is a retelling of Ratchet & Clank's initial meeting from the perspective of Captain Quark. This leads to him narrating over gameplay sections, which either acts as a tutorial or funny quips depending on the context. It's a pretty smart way to tell the story, but after a while it actually kind of takes a back seat to just let you enjoy the narrative naturally. Ratchet & Clank no longer face any kind of disagreement like they did originally. It's all sunshines and rainbows for these two. In some ways I appreciated this, since it meant less of asshole Ratchet, but this also means there are hardly any character arcs or development for either character, or most in the game, frankly. This is another aspect that will let down fans of the future series, and maybe even just fans of the original game who enjoy seeing these characters as characters. Calling them flat and bland isn't fitting, and the first game didn't incorporate its ideas perfectly, but the attempt at a flawed dynamic between these two was admittedly more interesting than a lack of trying. There are also some new characters introduced, called the Galactic Rangers, and I'm going to see if I can remember their individual names from memory. There was Drax, who I remember because his name is similar to Drek, and Bella Thorne and Rosario Dawson. These new characters are not fleshed out to any capacity and kind of feel like they just had to be here since they were already in the movie and they're already paying these celebrities, so why not get a few new lines out of them? So the same goes for Victor Von Ion, who is really only memorable since he appears consistently throughout the game. But I guess he's just meant to be Drek's grunt, so I guess he gets a pass? Naturally, being a retelling of the first game, Chairman Drek returns, and is still destroying planets for his own gain. Drek is sort of a weird red herring in this game, since while Ratchet interacts with him, they never actually have a full-blown confrontation. That is left to Dr. Nefarious, who partakes in this game's plot in squishy form, creating Drek's army. Nefarious is mentioned and shown a couple of times, but ultimately rids himself of Drek to become the game's final boss. I imagine this feels very lacking for anyone jumping on fresh with this series. If you love the games already, you likely love Nefarious, so you won't immediately mind as much, but then you think, why did Drek need to be a red herring? Couldn't we have at least gotten a boss fight with Drek at a point? Is this happening so Drek can return later in another game? I know this was just to set up Nefarious' hatred for Ratchet early, since Nefarious is pretty much the favorite villain in the series, rightfully so. But it kind of felt like a slap in the face to Drek, who is one of the series' most memorable and capable villains aside from Nefarious. Now don't get me wrong, Drek does some evil shit in this game, but we never get to give him his due, so it just left me feeling a bit empty. Ultimately though, the narrative still manages to entertain and humor, so while I've mostly been critical of the plot here, it's still enjoyable and a fun way to start anew. I just feel like being tied to a movie adaptation actually hurt this game's plot. And apologies if all that came off with way more complaining than positives, and don't worry, I'm wrapping up the review now. Overall, this new Ratchet game on PS4 is in my top 3 favorites in the series. I don't know exactly which spot it takes, but it's definitely up there. What Insomniac has crafted is an incredibly fun, addicting, rewarding game that just happens to stumble in a few areas that they have excelled in before. But I'm looking forward to the future. Ratchet & Clank on PS4 deserves to be a flagship title for the system, and a game that finds its way into every PS4 owner's library. Hopefully this title has breathed some new life into the series, and hopefully we can expect an entirely new entry next. I'll be waiting. But as for me, I'm finally done with all of the mainline Ratchet & Clank titles. I'm sorry it took me so long, but I'm ready to cover other games now. I committed to doing Deadlocked, but I'm going to save it for later when I come back to the series to cover some spin-offs. Sorry to anyone that I told I'd be covering it sooner. So I figure after I've had a monopoly on this video series for so long, I'd let you, the viewer, vote on what comes next. In the description there's a poll where you can vote for either Yakuza 5 or Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth as the next slated video. All that said, this has been MykonosFan, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Learning to Love PlayStation.